Hey everyone, welcome back to Heavenly Conversation. Today, we're diving into a message that I believe is for someone out there who's feeling overwhelmed, uncertain, or maybe even tempted to take matters into your own hands. Or have you ever found yourself at a crossroads, unsure of which path to take? Maybe you've been praying for direction, but the silence feels deafening in those moments. It's tempting to take matters into your own hands. But today's message is a reminder. Don't do it without God. Let's dive into God's Word and discover why. His guidance is the only way to true success and peace. Whether you're facing a big decision, a challenging season, or a dream you're pursuing, this message is for you. Let's get into it. Have you ever been in a situation where you felt like God was taking too long? Maybe you've been praying for a breakthrough, waiting for a door to open, or asking God for direction. But it seems like nothing is happening. In those moments, it's so easy to think, maybe I should just handle this myself. But let me tell you something. Doing things without God never ends well. Proverbs chapter 3, verse 5 to 6 reminds us to trust in the Lord with all our heart and lean not on our own understanding. In all your ways, submit to Him, and He will make your path straight. This verse is a cornerstone for living a life of faith. It reminds us that our understanding is limited, but God's wisdom is infinite. When we try to navigate life without Him, we're essentially walking in the dark. But when we trust Him, He lights the way. Let's look at the story of Peter in Matthew 14. Jesus had just fed the 5,000, and He sent His disciples ahead of Him in a boat while He went to pray. Later, in the middle of the night, the disciples found themselves in the middle of a storm. Suddenly, they saw Jesus walking on the water toward them. Peter, in a moment of boldness, said, "Lord, if it's you, tell me to come to you on the water." Jesus said, "Come." And Peter stepped out of the boat for a moment. He walked on water because he kept his eyes on Jesus. But when he saw the wind and the waves, he began to sink. He cried out, "Lord, save me." And immediately, Jesus reached out His hand and caught him. Here's the lesson. When Peter kept his focus on Jesus, he did the impossible. But the moment he took his eyes off Jesus and relied on his own strength, he began to sink. The same is true for us. When we try to do life without God, we're setting ourselves up to fail. But when we keep our eyes on Him, He empowers us to do what we could never do on our own. God had promised Abram that he would become the father of many nations. But as time went on, Sarai, his wife, remained childless instead of waiting on God's timing. Sarai came up with her own plan. She told Abram to have a child with her servant Hagar, and Abram agreed. Now, let's pause here. How many of us have done something similar? We hear God's promise, but when it doesn't happen on our timeline, we start to doubt. we start to think, maybe God needs my help. So, we take matters into our own hands. But look at what happened in this story. Sarai's plan led to jealousy, conflict, and pain. Ishmael was born, but he wasn't the child of promise. God's plan was still going to happen. But now, there were complications because Sarai and Abram decided to do it without God. Here's the truth. God's promises don't need our help to come to pass. Notice what it says. Lean not on your own understanding. That means even when it doesn't make sense to us, even when it feels like God is moving too slowly, we have to trust Him. His timing is perfect, and His ways are higher than ours. Here's the truth. God's promises don't need our help to come to pass. When we try to force things, we end up creating messes that God never intended for us. Remember what the Word says. Lean not on your own understanding. That means even when it doesn't make sense to us, even when it feels like God is moving too slowly, we have to trust Him. His timing is perfect, and His ways are higher than ours. Psalm chapter 127 verse 1 says, "Unless the Lord builds the house, the builders labor in vain. Unless the Lord watches over the city, the guards stand watch in vain." This verse is a powerful reminder that no matter how hard we work, no matter how much we plan, if God isn't in it, it's all in vain. Think about it. How many times have you tried to force something to happen, only to end up frustrated and exhausted? Maybe it was a relationship, a job opportunity, or a personal goal. You put in all the effort, but it just didn't work out. That's because when we do things without God, we're working against His perfect plan for our lives. God has a plan for you. Jeremiah chapter 29 verse 11 says, "For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans to prosper you and not to harm you, plans to give you hope and a future." His plans are always better than ours. But here's the catch. We have to trust Him enough to wait on His timing. It's not always easy. Waiting can be hard. But remember, God's delays are not God's denials. He's working behind the scenes, preparing you and positioning you for His best. When you try to rush the process or take shortcuts, you're settling for less than what He has in store for you. Isaiah chapter 55 verse 8 to 9 says, "For my thoughts are not your thoughts, neither are your ways my ways, declares the Lord. As the heavens are higher than the earth, so are my ways higher than your ways, and my thoughts than your thoughts." God's ways are higher than ours. What may seem like the right path to us could lead to destruction, while what seems difficult or uncertain could be the very thing God uses to bless us. That's why it's so important to seek His guidance in everything we do. James chapter 1 verse 5 encourages us as it states, "If any of you lacks wisdom, you should ask God, who gives generously to all without finding fault, and it will be given to you. If you're feeling unsure about a decision, ask God for wisdom. He promises to give it to you. But you have to be willing to listen and obey, even when His answer isn't what you were hoping for. So, here's the takeaway. Don't do it without God. Whether it's a big decision, a dream you're pursuing, or a challenge you're facing, bring it to Him. Trust His timing, seek His wisdom, and follow His lead. When you do, you'll find that His plans are far greater than anything you could ever imagine. Thanks for watching. If this message spoke to you, hit the like button, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and don't forget to subscribe for more content. Remember, God's got you. You don't have to do life alone. Until next time, walk in faith, and don't do it without God.